Hoop Heads podcast is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
If you haven't built up relational equity with somebody, you have no ask at all. So I think the ability to develop relational equity, and that starts by serving other people. And I think that's a challenge for people is we a lot of times get into relationships to take instead of give, and equity is never built by taking. Equity is always built by giving, and so I think being able to cultivate some relational equity with people is important. And then I think the second thing is success always is determined by your pain tolerance. It's always determined by your pain tolerance. Success requires suffering. And a lot of times the most successful people are the people that are willing to suffer the most. And if you have no desire to suffer, you have no chance of being successful. And I think it's painful. I mean, success is painful. It's hard. It's not easy. It's and success is defined differently in different situations. And so I think if you want to always be liked, if you want to always feel good, if you want to if you feel like you're entitled to things, if you feel like if the words come out of your mouth, that's not my job, if you're not willing to pick up trash, if you're not committed to excellence, if you don't care about relationships, you got no chance of being successful.
Matt King currently serves as the Executive Director of the Arizona Basketball Coaches Association and the Director of Basketball for CCV STARS. The Arizona Basketball Coaches Association focuses on connecting, developing, and serving Arizona coaches and has grown from 0 to almost 800 members in the past 16 months. CCV STARS basketball program is a youth basketball program that focuses on a more than a game philosophy and has grown from 800 kids annually to over 3,000 kids in the past 3 years. Matt was the head high school coach at O'Connor High School in Phoenix, Arizona, where in 4 years the program went from 6 wins to being in the top 10 in 6A in Arizona. Before O'Connor, Matt was the head coach at Clovis High School for 3 years, where the Wildcats made it to the state 5A semifinals and state 5A championship game. Coach King has worked with USA Basketball for the past 8.5 years in a variety of roles, including clinic speaker and lead clinician. He also helped write the curriculum for the USA Basketball player development model and served as a copywriter with the Junior NBA and USA Basketball in writing their youth guidelines. Coach Matt brings a unique and visionary perspective to the youth basketball landscape. You'll want to have your notebook ready as you enjoy this episode of the Hoop Heads podcast with Coach Matt King.
Hello and welcome to the Hoop Heads podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here with my co-host Jason Sunkel. And today we have, for our first coach from the great state of Arizona, we have Matt King, who is here with us. Matt is the executive director of the Arizona Basketball Coaches Association, among some of his other different things that he's done in the game. So Matt, we want to talk to you first here, get you started by asking how you got involved in the game of basketball from an early age.
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to say thanks. Thanks for having me on. It's really an honor. I'm really excited about what you guys are doing and how you're helping not only the game of basketball, but I think one of the things that you guys have done in the podcast that I've listened to is you're allowing guys to tell their story. And that's powerful because all our stories have some similarities to them, because I think the human story is relatively connected, but we all have our differences. And so I think it gives us an interesting look into other people's perspectives, but it also allows us to connect with other people and their experiences and realize that we're not alone. And so I really appreciate what you guys are doing for coaches and what you're doing for the community at large. As far as me and me getting into basketball, I think my story is relatively similar to a lot of people. I played basketball because I wanted to hang out with my dad. My dad was a college player. He was a college coach for a few years, was a high school coach, and my dad was my hero. I mean, my dad was the guy I wanted to spend time with when I woke up. He was the guy that I wanted to spend time with before I went to bed, and he was the guy that loved basketball. And so I loved basketball, and I think that's where my passion for the game really started, was out of connection and this bond that me and my father had. And still to this day, my dad's the best coach I've ever been around, and he's one of the best men I've ever been around. And so that's where I started, and my love for the game developed from there. Then as I grew up, I think with anybody that has a sustainable passion for anything, you can't live on someone else's passion. You have to own that passion. And I think probably in high school, I really started to develop a passion for the game and a passion to get better as a player. But also, I don't think I ever saw myself as a long-term player. Like I was just slow enough to know that I wasn't going to be good enough.
We have to ask you: did anyone ever describe you as sneaky athletic?
No, they described me as unathletic.
There you go. All right, there you go.
I didn't even get the sneaky. Like
nice.
I didn't even get sneaky.
Nice.
I think I was. I mean, I was a decent high school player, and I was thankful for the time that I played. But I don't know. Maybe there's other coaches around the country that can relate with this. But every day that I went to practice, I knew, like, if I stayed in the game, I was going to be a coach. I wasn't going to be a player. And I started to look at the game from that perspective. I think I always saw myself going that route as opposed to the playing route. And so from there, I think intellectually I began to think about the game in different ways. And then I took some time away from the game. And to be honest with you, my passion for the game now is more bred out of my time away from the game than it is from my time in the game. I had to come to grips with the fact that basketball is not the most important thing in the world, and basketball is not supreme. And when I started to realize that, I developed a love for the game that's pure and true and good, because I saw what the game can be used for, as opposed to the game, like when the game is supreme, when it is everything in your life, it just lets you down. Like, it's never going to deliver on what it promises, and it tends to use you. But when you utilize the game, when you use the game as a means of impacting people's lives and serving others and creating communities where people can be the best versions of themselves, that's when the game gets fun. That's when you start to enjoy the game, and the game becomes a vehicle to make impact. And that's why I love the game so much, is because of what it provides us the opportunity to do as human beings. It's really a simple game, and it's really not that complicated, but what it does and how it brings people together and the social connections that we have because of it are incredible. And I'm so thankful to this little kids game we play for what it's brought into my life.
So when you were a little kid, did you play other sports? And then if you did, what was it about basketball that made you grab onto that as the sport that you really wanted to pursue, whether it was as a player for a time and then eventually as a coach?
Yeah, I did. I played baseball very consistently throughout, even through high school. I think I stopped playing baseball my junior year in high school, and I think the thing that connected me with basketball, one, it's a sport where everybody's involved, and I always enjoyed that. I always enjoyed being a part of that, and then I think also too, one of the great reasons to be a multi-sport athlete when you're young is you get an opportunity to explore what you're good at, and I think certain people develop in certain sports just a little bit better for whatever reason. I mean, I'm 6'6". That helped me out as a basketball player, and that was something that was beneficial and valuable to me. I think also too, I don't think people give credit for the community that surrounds them. Like, I grew up in a house with a basketball coach who could give me really good, like we talk about, like these skill trainers and I never had my skill development guy was my dad. Like, he was the dude dude that took me outside, and he's the guy that pushed me. Like, my dad never got paid by the hour to train his son. Like, he just did it because he loved me. He did it because he wanted to spend time with me, and he was really, really good at it. And so I think because of those things, because of really good instruction, because of the ability to see reward, because of the accountability that my dad held me to, I think I gravitated towards that more than I did baseball, and I'm thankful for that.
How do you think that impacts when you look at what you're doing today and you think about working with kids? How do you think that impacts the early specialization debate that is out there in youth basketball and in basically all of youth sports, where you have kids that are, beginning to specialize earlier and earlier, it seems? And so what's your position feeling in terms of what's going on in the youth sports landscape with early specialization?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm glad you asked that. I don't think early specialization is a debate. I just don't. I think if you look at any scientific research, early specialization, you look at any major organization. I had the privilege of being a part of helping develop the youth guidelines for USA Basketball and the Junior NBA, and there was never two sides to the coin. There was never somebody that got to argue early specialization and somebody that argued multi-sport athletic development. There was only people arguing multi-sport athletic development. The early specialization, in my opinion, has not been created because of the kid. Early specialization has been created because of the club and because of the adults. We create these things because we need a sustainable revenue. We have to have kids playing 10, 11, 12 months a year so that we can have monthly income, so that we can pay our bills, and we can justify that. But there's nothing scientifically that says that kids that specialize in things early on are better off for it. In fact, all of the research shows that is absolutely false and not true. And so there's not much of an argument on that side. I think the popular opinion argument comes from this idea that the more I practice a certain sport, the better I'll get at it, which makes logical sense, right? But at the early ages, what we don't realize is that by specializing in the motor movements of a certain sport at an early age, we are saying no to the motor movements that we have developed, the motor skills that we've developed in other sports. So there's so many things that I became a better basketball player for because I played baseball when I was young, because I played some football when I was young, because they helped me develop motor skills that helped me as a basketball player as I grew up. And I don't think I'll ever forget this. One of our physicians that was on the medical working group with the Junior NBA and USA Basketball did a study with the Division I athletes at UCLA, and the average age of a player on the UCLA football team that specialized in a sport, when they specialized in a sport, was 15.6 years old. For a Division I athlete, and when I heard that, I started to realize, man, we're doing a disservice to kids by not pushing this. And so for me in Arizona now, my youth program that I'm a part of, I have the fortune of being a part of a multi-sport club where kids can play soccer, they can play football, or they can play basketball. And in my opinion, I think more of them should pop up around the country, where kids can stay within the same club, they can stay within the same culture, they can stay within the same environment, but they can have the opportunity to play multiple sports. And I think, quite frankly, for the club directors, it's a better business model than focusing on one specific sport when kids are young.
I really like what you said about the whole multi-sport thing. It's been a debate we've had with some of the other coaches. I also coach middle school basketball, and some of the other coaches think they want their kids to only do one sport, and parents only want their kids to do one sport, and I really have a hard time explaining to them, even though, like you said, there's no scientific research that shows that doing one sport is beneficial to kids. They should be doing as many as they possibly can, because there's lots of different skills you learn in different sports. So it's not specializing that's better. It's doing all the different things, because you never know if you're going to be good at something until you do it and do it regularly. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you never know how you're going to grow. You never know. There's a lot of variables that change over the course of time, and I agree with you completely. And I think I have total sympathy for people that would argue on that side of the coin. I just don't think there's much of a debate like at scientific levels, or at academic levels, or major organization levels. I mean, I've sat with the biggest of the biggest organizations in youth basketball, and there's not one of them that has been like, hey, let's wait just a second. I think this specialization thing has something to it. There hasn't been one of them, and so I think to me that says that we have some room to grow in popular opinion about what's best for our kids as they develop.
So I know you said that one of the things that obviously drives this is people who own a single sport business, and obviously they need people to be coming through the door year round in order to make money. And then I think the second piece of it that you and I talked about on our pre-call before we recorded the podcast is the need to educate parents, because a lot of it is a parent A is sitting in the stands and they're listening to parents B and C talk about all the training that their kid is doing and the number of leagues they're playing in and the teams that they're on, and people start to feel this pressure of, boy, my kid is falling behind. And I think there's such a need for education of parents through, again, the guidelines of that you were involved in with USA Basketball and the junior NBA, and just getting people to understand the statistics, like the UCLA Division I athletes didn't specialize until age 15.6. How do we go about making parents aware of what the true facts are? I know that's a difficult fight.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, and it's not an easy one. It's not a short one. I think anything that you're trying to do where there's culture change or culture making, it's a long-term process, and we live in a short-term culture, and so those are difficult things. I remember, I think it was last February, April, I had the opportunity to go to Colorado Springs and spend a little time with club directors from all over the country in a variety of different sports, and had a chance to talk to a guy from USA Hockey, and I asked him that question. I said, how do you communicate this? How do you educate people on this process? And I thought his answer was really profound. He said, through drip communication, you just one drip at a time. Just one drip at a time, one drip at a time. And I think a lot of us expect, like, hey, somebody's going to send out a tweet and the world's going to change, or somebody's going to write a blog and the world's going to change. It doesn't change like that. It changes one drip at a time. And then 20 years from now, you realize, holy smokes, like, we think about things a little bit differently now than we did. But it's like you're growing. You don't realize how much you've grown until you look in the mirror. Or you don't realize how much weight you've lost or how much weight you've gained until you start looking in the mirror. And I think that's the same way with this process. Is a couple things. I think one is just realizing every conversation you have matters. So every conversation you have with your parents, every conversation you have with your kids, every conversation you have with your teams, those are all a part of building the culture of USA Basketball. And if there's one message I could get across, it's that as Americans, we should stop looking at USA Basketball as an organization. It is an organization, and it's a great organization, but we should start realizing that we are USA Basketball. We are the people that are building the game. We are the people that are doing it on a daily basis. We are the ones that are we're USA Basketball, and so we have to keep cultivating that, and every little conversation matters. And in my conversations with coaches, I find that a lot of times they expect, like, hey, the major organization will change it, or that's not how it happens. It happens with everybody being involved in that process.
Yeah, I think those individual conversations are definitely where it starts, because when you have, as a coach or as a program director, you have one conversation with one parent and you get the message across to them and they start to see it and then they talk to other people. The same way it spreads in a negative way, we want to spread that same gospel in a positive way so that people begin to understand that, the multi-sport athlete is probably in the long term much more likely to have success in whatever they end up, whether it's basketball or whether it's some other sport. I think that by doing it the way you described, that one drip at a time, I think is a great analogy in terms of how we would look at that. Let's go back to. So go ahead.
Can I say one thing?
Sure, absolutely, Matt.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Sorry about that. I just want to say, I think the important thing is to remember that cultures exist in concentric circles. Like, cultures do not ever exist in a vacuum. So when let's say you're working with your high school team, every day that you work with your high school team and you build a culture within your high school team, that culture that you are building impacts other cultures. So it impacts the home. So what you are teaching your kids in the gym, hey, you need to show up on time. Hey, you're going to be held accountable. Hey, you're going to be respectful. Hey, you're going to go to school. There's no way that doesn't go home and impact the home, the culture in the home. And there's no way that doesn't impact the culture of your community. And there's no way that community doesn't impact the culture of your city and state and ultimately your country. And so I think a lot of times guys look at things like the NBA, or they look at USA basketball and they go, man, if I really want to make a big impact, I've got to be involved in something like that. That is total BS. The greatest way to make an impact is to allow the culture that you are in and the place that you are the place that you are at to have a ripple effect. And it can absolutely have a ripple effect, not only downward, so your program into the home, or upward, your program into your community, into your city. But I think it is a misnomer to believe that the culture that you are building or not building is not impacting other cultures. Cultures always exist in concentric circles. They never exist alone. And so the culture you're building right now, it is absolutely impacting the culture of our country and the game as a whole.
I think that's important. I'm glad you brought that up, because to me, I think that's something that is important for every coach, teacher, anyone who works with kids, to remember that the things that you're doing on a daily basis, again, whether it's with your team, in the gym, whether it's with your students in the classroom, whether it's with your, program you're doing in the community, that it's not just what you're doing in the moment with those kids. It's, like you said, what is being brought to the other areas that those kids touch and what they bring back with them. So I think that's a really good point that you brought up, and I appreciate you taking the time to share that with us. So let's talk about your time as a high school coach and how you went about building the culture in the two programs that you were the head coach for. How did you go about creating the type of culture that you wanted to have, and what was the culture that you were striving for with the teams that you coached?
Yeah, so I was a head high school coach for 9 years, and I'm going to tell you too, I guarantee you guys have coaches out there that are listening to this, or you have coaches that are going to be listening to this, that you just feel like, man, I am not sure I'm really good at this. Well, let me tell you, I think out of the 9 years that I was a high school head coach, I don't think I was very good for 7 out of the 9 years. I coached like I was coached. I think I knew a little bit about the game. I cared deeply. I was incredibly passionate. But to be honest with you, I think I coached kids for what they could make of me, not what I could make of them. I think the first 7 years of my life, I wanted to win so I could be somebody, so I could be recognized, so I could move up the ladder, so I could get another job, so I could make more money, so I could just be validated. So people in the coaching community would look at me and say, man, that guy does a good job, or I really appreciate the way he coaches his kids, or whatever. But ultimately, at the end of the day, my motivations were about me. They were about me, and they were about me alone. And about 2 years ago, I had a situation where, and I'll tell you, during those 7 years, we had a team that went to the state semifinals. We had a team that went to the state finals, but it was never joyful. It doesn't have to be fun all the time, but it was never joyful. And I can remember about 2 years ago just finally saying, man, I'm going to do it different. I'm just going to do it different. Like I don't care what people think about me. I don't care if they like the way we play. I don't care if I get another job. I don't care. I just want to do kids right. I just want to serve them well. And when that changed, I started to change. And when I started to change, I started to see life in my kids, and I started to see kids that were passionate about playing. I started to see kids that came into the gym smiling, and they were hungry to get better. And fortunately, that helped us as a team. We got a lot better. But I'll tell you this, I could sit here on this podcast and talk about all of our wins and all of our runs and all of that stuff, but in a just a hopefully humble vulnerability. I think it took me a long time to figure out how to coach kids, and I could go into a lot of things that go with that. But I think I am 9 years into it now, and I feel like I'm at a place where I can finally coach.
So what made the difference 2 years ago? What made you think, hey, I've got to approach the way I'm coaching differently? Was there a singular event? Was it just the fact that you were exposed to other coaches and ideas and processes, and you started looking at, hey, the way I was coached maybe isn't the most effective way to coach kids today? What was it that made you flip that switch?
I think there's a few things. I think it was events. I think it was seeing kids with their shoulders slumped over. We were getting better. Like, kids were improving, but I didn't feel like they were having a great experience, and that bothered me. It bothered me that kids would come into our program, become better basketball players, become in some ways better, like morally better people, but not look back on it with a fond memory, and that bothered me, and it might not bother a lot of guys, but it bothered me, and I just knew there was something inside of me that was saying, man, these guys got to change. I mean, and also too, I am deeply, I'm a Christian guy. And the way that I was handling those kids was not consistent with what I believed in, and I just knew some things needed to change. And the biggest thing that needed to change was I needed to get over myself, and I needed to realize that they're not here for me. I'm here for them. And when I started to realize that, things started to change, and I started to change, and I'm thankful for those kids in my first 7 years that tried their absolute hardest to do what a coach was asking them to do, even though the coach was probably a little too into himself. And I'm thankful for the process that I've got to go through to get there and to get to where I'm at now, and how I feel about the game, and how I feel about serving kids, and how I feel about how I want to go about my business. But it's been a process to get there for sure.
Going back to what you just talked about, like the kids with their, like, didn't seem like they were having fun or whatnot. Did you find that you had kids like not quitting basketball after 1 year and not coming back, or was it more or less you just saw it that was going on, like, while they were still coming back because they liked the game enough to kind of stick it out? Or did you find the kids lost their love for the game, and just like after their freshman and sophomore years they just quit playing basketball? Did you notice that, or was it
well,
afterwards?
I think quitting's a whole. Yeah, so I think quitting probably a whole other topic. I think that's going to happen in good programs. That stuff's going to happen from time to time, and kids going to decide, you know what, I don't want to make a commitment, and I don't want to make this. I don't want to make this sound like I got to this place where like we rolled the balls out and kids just kind of jumped up and down and we all had fun and everybody smiled. Like, no, I think for us, like having fun was accomplishing something. Having fun was doing something together. Having fun was working our butts off. Having fun was competing hard. Having fun was being a group that thought about each other more than they thought about themselves. And I think that has to start with the coach. I have a feeling that my story is not the only story. I think there's a lot of young guys, and I get it, man. I totally get it. Like, you're in a place in your career where you're trying to make a name for yourself, and I can just say there's so much sympathy I have for that, and yet I would just tell every one of them, man, it's so dangerous. Like, it's just such a dangerous pursuit, because one, you can never make enough of a name for yourself. You always want a little bit more. You always want to be a little bit more recognized. You always want to be a little bit more popular. You always want to promote yourself just a little bit more. It is a never-ending spiral. And unfortunately, in that spiral, you can lose track of your why. You can lose track of why you got into it and why you do it. And so I think for me, it was just rediscovering, like, hey, this is why I do what I do. This is why I love the game. This is why I love serving kids. And so I don't think it was an issue of, hey, these kids are quitting, or these kids are staying, or this kid doesn't have a smile on his face, or whatever the case may be. But I will tell you, I think I would like kids in my program that love to play and that enjoy playing. And I think a lot of times we take too much credit for their love for the game, and sometimes when they fall out of love for the games, a lot of times that unfortunately has to deal with the way we've handled them as coaches.
So what can you give us one concrete example of something that you did differently after sort of your transformation? So before, in your first 7 years, you would do X, and then now in the last couple of years after your transformation, now you're doing something differently. What's a specific example of something that you changed that another coach out there could apply to what they're trying to do in their program?
Yeah, pretty simple, man. Make kids earn frowns, not smiles. Make kids earn frowns, not smiles. The first 7 years of my coaching career, I walked in the gym with a frown and you had to earn a smile. Last 2 years of my coaching career, I walked in the gym with a smile and you had to earn a frown. Doesn't mean I'm not going to give some frowns. Doesn't mean they're not going to get earned, because with high school kids, they absolutely do.
For sure.
But I think it changes the whole demeanor of the gym. And when I started to realize that I want to walk into every situation with a smile. What do I have to not be happy about? I mean, I got an unbelievable life. I got 2 great kids. I got an unbelievable wife. I mean, I've got every reason to smile every second of the day. And so if I'm gonna interact with people, whether that be on this podcast or that be me walking in the gym to coach a group or whatever it is, you're gonna have to earn a frown from me. You're not gonna have to earn a smile. And I think early on in my career, man, I mastered the frown. I knew how to do that. I didn't know how to smile very well. And then I'll tell you this, for a guy like me who's type A and super intense, and like I'm not a happy-go-lucky dude. Like, the glass is usually half empty for me, and so I have to discipline myself. Like, there are times throughout my day where I have to, like, dude, smile. Like right now, I don't care how you feel, I don't care what you like, smile. And just the whole demeanor of that helps me. It helps me to realize, like, hey man, life ain't as bad as you seem to think it is, and it ain't as serious as you seem to think it is. And I think when those things started to change in my life, I started to coach a little bit different. And then the second thing is just praising kids loudly and criticizing them softly. Really learning how to. That was so reverse in the early parts of my career. I praised kids softly and I criticized them really loudly, because I wanted everybody in the gym to know like, hey, dude, that mistake that just happened, that's not what that kid got taught. Like, I taught him something different than that, and I'm going to make sure everybody in the gym understands that I taught him something different than that. The later I got into my career, the more that I realized, like, that's not going to happen. Like, that's not right to that kid. That's not right to nobody. I don't want to go to work and have my boss yell at me in front of all the people in my office. If he has something to say to me that is constructively critical, he needs to pull me into his office and needs to talk to me about it. And I don't understand why we would treat a kid differently than we would treat an adult. I think we should probably treat them the same exact way. And I had to learn that.
Don't you think that a lot of that stems from kind of what you talked about? And I know that I can say from my experience and some of the other guys that we've talked about that, are kind of our generation, that there was a lot more coaching of that style when we were growing up, as opposed to now. I think coaching, people have begun to realize that whether it's the generation that we're coaching now or whether it's just the way that things have sort of transpired over time, but I think relationships between players and coaches are so much more important in terms of getting the most out of your kids compared to what it might have been back 15, 20, 25 years ago. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I really do. I think ultimately it boils down to the core issue of, like, do your players deserve dignity and respect or not? Like, you deserve it. You believe you deserve it. We all as human beings believe we deserve it. But it's amazing to see oftentimes how, and I'll tell you, for me, I can't speak for any other coach, and I wouldn't pass judgment on anybody else, but I'll tell you this. The way I talk to some of my kids early on in their career from the sideline, and I've never been a cusser or anything like that, but just the tone of my voice towards them, and the way that I talk to officials during part of my career, man, I never talked to somebody like that on the street. Like, I'd never talk to somebody like that if they came into my office. And so if that's the case, then what's the issue there? Does the environment just allow me to do those things? Or do I need to be more disciplined? And I think part of that is what I had to come to grips with is I just get pretty undisciplined. I get pretty undisciplined with my tongue. I get pretty undisciplined with my emotions. And then I tell my kids to be poised. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. If I want my kids to be poised, I got to be poised. If I want my kids to act a certain way, if I want my kids to be respectful of everybody, I need to be respectful of everybody, including them. And I think it was just starting to get to the point of trying to be consistent with that. And I'll tell you that it's a messy process. I can tell you, in our program, we transitioned from the early stages of my head coaching career. We'd have all these core values, like we had integrity and honesty and all of these core values. And I don't blame anybody for having them. Those are unbelievable traits to have, and those are great things to have. But I can guarantee you, every kid in your program has been imperfect at every one of those values. And so what we started to realize was we were asking kids to be perfect at things they could absolutely never be perfect at. And so what we started to do is we started to reform our core values, and they ended up being three things. One, you had to be committed. So you had to make a commitment to what we were doing. You had to be engaged every day. We couldn't get anything done if you weren't engaged. So you had to be engaged. And then the third thing was you had to be imperfect. You had to be willing to admit that you had faults, that you had problems. Because once you're willing to admit those things, and once you're willing to be open about those things, then you can actually deal with them. Then you can actually do that stuff. And I'll tell you, a lot of times when I listen to podcasts, and this is part of the reason I'm being as honest as I am on this, is a lot of times when you listen to things, you get done with it and you're like, man, that dude, like, there's Jesus, and then
right, he's perfect. Right, he's perfect.
Like, he is, like, he just never made a mistake in his entire life. And those are the dudes that struggle. I mean, like, that's not true. That's not true of anybody who's ever talked about that in their entire life. The only guarantee for every person talking on this podcast or listening to it is that every single one of us is going to be imperfect today. And so how do we handle that? How do we deal with that? What's our plan for dealing with our imperfections? And I think a lot of times we put these strategies together to create this perfect world, and then imperfection hits us and we have no idea how to handle it. Instead of starting with, hey man, this is going to be messy, this is going to be imperfect, dudes are going to make mistakes every single day, let's start with how are we going to handle that, and then from there let's build from there. So that to me makes more sense when you're dealing with human beings, as opposed to believing that you're going to create this environment where everybody's going to be super competitive, killers and Mother Teresa at the same time. Like,
yeah, it is.
I don't know that person. Like, maybe you have 12 of them, but I've never had that.
Well, I think there's
messy teams with dudes that make mistakes.
And I think I think that you hit on something that I mean, I love. I've never heard anybody say that before in anywhere, that one of the core values is being imperfect. And I think that hits on so many things, both from a coaching standpoint, from a playing standpoint, just from a human being standpoint, that we all know that if we learn, that learning is messy, that growth doesn't happen simply where I just go out and everything works out exactly the way I want it to, and there's a nice steady curve up as we improve and learn. And so I think that to hear you say that, we embrace that imperfection, that we want you to push yourself, and you're going to try to get to this certain level, but we understand that there's going to be fits and starts as you go along. And when you kind of throw yourself into that same mix with your players, and everybody is understanding that, hey, mistakes are going to be made, wow, it just creates an environment where everybody has an opportunity to push themselves and stretch themselves. So my question to you on that one is, when you started to look at yourself and say, okay, I'm starting to think that there are things that I should be doing differently, was there any outside influences? Like, were you talking to any of your fellow coaches or mentors, somebody in your family, or was this more of a self-aware thing that as you maybe read books or talked to people that you kind of came to the realization on your own?
I think a little bit of both. I think one, it's incredibly easy to veil selfishness, especially as coaches, because we know all these cliches to say. Like, we know all these like phrases, especially when we talk to our mentors and we talk to other people in the coaching community. Like, we can veil selfishness like incredibly easily, and because we have all these catchphrases that we use to try to make sure everybody realizes that, no, like, this guy actually, he's there for the kids, and he's not about the money, and he's like, no, that's BS, dude. Like, you're not always there for the kids, and you're not, you want to make some money doing this, so like, why don't you just admit it? Why don't you just say it? Like, that's stupid. It doesn't make sense to me that you wouldn't just be honest about those things, because we all have them. They're all issues. So if they're issues, let's figure out how to do that right. Like let's figure out, I hear this all the time, like, it's got to be all about the kids. Yeah, I get that. Like, we want the kids to be the center of this, and they're the people that we're serving and on. But let's make it all about all the humans. Like, let's make sure all the humans value and benefit and grow through this experience. So how can the coaches get better? How can the coaches continue to keep coaching? Like, we have coaches leaving the profession over, like, every single year. You hear more guys are leaving it than are getting into it, and part of the reason they're leaving it is because there's like, this is like an incredibly, like, to be able to do this for a long time, unless you're just kind of like doing stuff on the side to figure it out, like, this is not a labor of love anymore. Like, this is a labor of like incredible self-sacrifice at times. And I think that the best thing for us as a coaching community to do is, let's just be honest, man. Like, I ask guys all the time here, like, hey man, why are you doing this? Like, hey, I'm going to do a camp, and it's because I just really want kids to get better. It's like, no, because you have your daughter's, club softball payment coming up, and you got to make a little extra money to pay for that. And like, I get it, man. I totally get it. Like, I want your daughter to play club softball. That's cool. Let's see how we can benefit the community and serve the community, and we can pay for your daughter's club softball. Like, let's just try to figure out a way to do that. But the only way we can do that is if you're honest. Like, if you're honest about what you're doing. And I think what I finally come to grips with is, what benefit does it give me to just not be straightforward? Like, everybody in my program knew I was a knucklehead. I was just trying to make them all think I wasn't. Like, that's all I'm bringing to the table, guys. Like, I'm a knucklehead just trying to figure it out. And when I was finally willing to admit that, and I was finally willing to say that, it started to help me understand, like, hey man, I got a long ways to go, but I'm a little bit further than I was yesterday, and I don't have to wear any masks. I'm good with who I am. I'm good with who God created me to be, and I'm just going to be that to the best of my ability today, and we're going to see where it goes.
So I'm going to kind of take a point that you made there and ask you a question based off it. You said something along the lines of talking about like being honest about things in the money or being into money and having reasons for doing what you're doing. So kind of going off of that, like, what's your feelings on AAU and like how that's affecting youth development, and what do you, I know there's no quick fix to AAU, but do you have any ideas as to how AAU possibly, if you feel like it's flawed, could be fixed?
Yeah, so first of all, I'll say this: most AAU guys aren't making any money. I think there's a humongous misnomer that a lot of AAU guys are, and I shouldn't say AAU because, like, let's make a clear distinction. There's an actual organization called the AAU, and I've gotten to know some guys there, and there's some tremendous people at that organization. But let's just talk about non-scholastic basketball in general, just club basketball in general. Most people in club basketball in America are not making money. I guarantee you there's more guys leveraging their credit card every summer to try to get the next college job than there are guys that are actually have a sustainable business model in AAU. And the reason for that is because we sell a bag of goods. Like, it's just, we sell a crock. We sell this idea of elite when there's only 1% of the population in America that can be elite. 1 to 3% can be elite. That's it. Yet we sell this product to 100% of the population. So 97% of our market we're lying to. We know they can never get there, and yet we still sell that product to them. And so I would say, first and foremost, to think that, and I know there's an idea out there like, oh man, that guy's making so much money. He's not. Most of these, there's overhead costs that are much greater in basketball than they are in other places. And in club sports and youth sports, you make money when you volumize your model, not when you have 4 kids or 10 kids or 20 kids. Because the way that we've created the system in America, the actual elite, the best players on your team, most of them don't pay. Like, you have 10 kids on your team, and you gave 4 of them scholarships because they could get the other 6 kids. And so the business model in America and the idea of selling elite to kids, it doesn't make sense from a sustainable business model outside of the top 1% of club operators in the country that have a shoe sponsorship or they have this or that. But I would say even the groups that have sponsorships from shoe companies, there's not multiple people. There's not a lot of people in their organization that are making a lot of money. There might be one guy that's making money, but there's not a lot of guys in that organization that are making money. Most of the guys aren't making anything. And so I think that's the first thing, is to realize that the model that we have created is not making people, it's not making people rich by any means. It's making people poor. Secondly, I think the biggest thing that we have to understand when it comes to youth basketball in the non-scholastic area is we have one of two options. We can either look at club basketball as a machine that's broken and we just got to get a part to go fix that machine, or we can look at club basketball as a garden that we have to cultivate, and we have to water, and we have to plant, and we have to help make it grow. I think, unfortunately, we look at club basketball like it's a machine. There's a broken piece in it. If we just find that magic fix, and that magic fix could be an organization, that magic fix could be a tournament, that magic fix could be a new structure or whatever, and we just throw that into the space, that'll fix the machine, and then we can back away. We don't really have to do anything with it, and the machine just keeps working. That's not how human beings work. That's not how human cultures work. They're much more like a garden that you have to cultivate every single day. And you got to get down, and you got to plant, and then you got to water, and then you got to move dirt. And then the next day, what do you got to do? You got to get up, and you got to water, and you got to do up. And then the next day, you got to get up, and you got to water it. And we just don't water that space real well. We don't have much structure around it. We don't have standards around it. We don't have systems in place. So we can't cultivate the space real well. And so I think it starts with having standards in the space, making sure that the game is safe, making sure that knuckleheads are not around kids. And I'll tell you this, I'd love for everybody in America to be able to work in basketball, except for somebody that's going to do something bad to a kid. If you're going to do something bad to a kid, you need to get away from the game as fast as possible. And if there's anybody out there that has any inclination that somebody's going to do something bad to a kid, you need to report that. And you need to get that guy out of the gym. We need to make sure basketball gyms are the safest place for kids to go. That's step number one. Step number two is making sure that we're developing coaches and helping them get better. Because if you give a kid a good coach, he's hooked for life. That's the key conduit to absolutely everything. And then we have to build sustainable communities. We have to build communities that have the ability to work within a system so that kids can be provided with the proper opportunities, and then they have access to national programs that can provide them great help as well. And so we have to have standards. We have to have a system. And in my view, that system has to have 4 parts. I think those 4 parts are pretty simple in our USA basketball player development model. You have introductory basketball, which is for kids that want to play for fun, friends, and physical activity, and that's the only reason they want to play. They don't want to get better. They don't want to develop. And I know for everybody listening to this podcast, you're like, man, that's crazy. No, there's a large segment of the population in our country that could give a bigger rat's you-know-what about getting better. They don't care about getting better. They just want to have fun. They want to make a friend, and they want to run around. And there's no reason why those kids shouldn't have the opportunity to play basketball. Doesn't mean I want to coach them. Doesn't mean I'm good to coach them. But there's no reason they shouldn't have an opportunity to play. And then the second level is called foundational basketball, which exists for kids to be developed and for kids to be challenged. So this is where they get to explore the game. It's not about wins and losses. It's about kids getting better. It's about kids getting fundamental skills. It's about kids understanding how to explore the game so that hopefully they can develop a love for the game. And then the third level is called the advanced level, and that's where kids learn how to compete and they learn how to train. This is where kids want to make sacrifices, and they wake up in the morning and all their friends want to go to the pool, or they want to go to the beach, or they want to go to the movies, and they're like, nah man, I can't do that, I gotta get shots up. That's an advanced level type kid. And then you have performance level kids, which would be anybody that is college recruitable, like a kid that, hey, I'm gonna either get my education paid for, or maybe someday I might make some money playing this game. And so that level is incredibly small. I think when we have a system like that, what it does is it all inclusively says everybody has a place. Everybody in the game has a place. Everybody has a level. Everybody has a place in the system where we can serve you well, you can enjoy the game, and you can get better at it. And I think once we have that, once that is in line across the space nationally, then a couple things can happen. Number one, people can really start to tune in onto the market that they're serving. So if I work with advanced level kids, I'm a club coach where our kids travel regionally or whatever the case may be. Like, I know what I'm selling advanced level kids, and I know how to serve advanced level kids. And then if I have introductory kids walks in for the first time, has never picked up a ball in his life, I know how to work with that kid. I know what that kid wants or what he needs, and I know where a good place for him to be is. But right now, when we look at youth basketball, we all have a different definition of what it is, and it's all in one category. It's one like huge lump together, and that's all basketball. And what I've learned over the last 3 or 4 years building our youth program here in Phoenix is there's a lot of different reasons why people play this game. And if we want to serve people well, we got to understand what those different reasons are, and we got to provide opportunities for people to play for a variety of different reasons in different ways. And I think also too, when you figure that out, you start to understand there's a business model behind that can actually be sustainable. And just so everybody knows, like, it's straightforward. I run a youth program here in Phoenix. I run the basketball portion of a Multisport club, and it's my full-time job. I have full benefits. I do not teach anymore. That's all I do is I do basketball. And I can tell you that I don't know a ton of guys that are selling elite in my city or in any city that's their full-time job. That's very few and far between.
So talk about the two things related to, your club. Talk about what the business model looks like, because again, I get the feeling that in our audience, we're going to have not only high school coaches and parents, but we're also going to have guys who are independently having, their basketball businesses, whether they're AAU clubs or trainers, whatever the case may be. So talk a little bit about the actual business model that you guys have. And then number 2, talk about what your program looks like for a kid at one or multiple of those different levels that you discussed.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I think a couple different things. One, I think any business model that's going to be sustainable and successful at the youth level is a model that is volumized, and I think that that's really important to understand. And I think understanding that introductory basketball, kids that step into the gym for the first time, and foundational basketball are the levels where most of the population plays. I would say, I don't know what a percentage is, but there's a lot of kids that are playing introductory basketball and are playing foundational level basketball. And so for us, we built our program here on introductory basketball, and that's where it started. And typically, if you're out there and you're building a youth program, I would say your base is, for us, our base is pre-K and first and second grade. And that's where we know our program is going to be built out of. And so we have about 200 kids per season that play in those two divisions. And so we have to provide something for them that is appropriate for where they're at in the game, provides them a good experience, and provides them what introductory basketball should provide kids. So we play 4-on-4. We don't keep score. We play on short courts, and that's one thing that I would highly encourage all of the people that are listening that are thinking about building facilities. Don't build facilities with 94-foot courts and that's it. It's going to be really difficult to create a business model with a couple 94-foot courts and a couple baskets on every court. Build floors with short courts. Build floors where kids can play short-sided games. It's a much better experience for young kids. They get more touches. There's less time in transition. It's almost unbearable to watch a first and second grade team play on a real size court. It's almost the exact same thing of like having a t-ball team play on a major league field. I mean, it's really hard to watch. And I think but most of our gyms are created that way. Most of our gyms don't have short courts for kids to play on. And if I was building a facility today, I would build facility with, obviously you have lines for main courts, but I would build them with a bunch of short courts on them, because that's where you can build sustainable leagues from. So when we created our divisions, we created an introductory division, and we don't do that by age, we do it by stage. So we have K through 6th grade in introductory. And if you ever want to see something incredibly interesting, go watch a 5th and 6th grade introductory level game, where they could care less about playing basketball in high school. They just want to throw line drives at the basket and laugh. And those kids love the game. Their parents enjoy watching them play, but they don't have any desire to become a good basketball player. They just enjoy the game. They enjoy running up and down, and they can play with kids that are at their same skill level. And then we started foundational basketball. We have third grade through 8th grade in foundational basketball. And then we added our third level, which we call our academy, which is 5th grade through 8th grade. And every stage, so at 3rd grade and at 5th grade, the question has to be asked, do you want more? Like, do you want more than you currently have? If you don't want more, then you can stay where you're at. But if you do want more out of your experience, then we can provide you an opportunity to get more out of the game than you've gotten. And so that's kind of our model. We provide 4 sessions of leagues throughout the year, and then we do camps in the summer and stuff like that. But it's been eye-opening how breaking them up into introductory, foundational, and academy level basketball, it has just caused our program to explode. 2.5 years ago, we had about 800 kids per year that play basketball in our program. This year we'll have over 3,000 kids that'll play basketball in our program, and it's been incredible to see the growth.
That's awesome. I want to just hit on one thing that you said earlier about the short-sided games. You know, Mike and I, back on July 6th, we released an episode. We talked about short-sided games and how important it is for kids to play short-sided games. And I genuinely feel like parents don't understand the purpose of it because they're so used to seeing people run up and down the floor and play full court. They don't see the benefits of short-sided games, and it's really, really important for kids and youth players to do that. One thing you didn't mention, though, in regards to the short-sided games is, when do you feel it's appropriate for kids to start shooting at 10-foot hoops? Do you feel like is it depending on their development, or is there a specific age that you feel that they should be shooting on 10-foot hoops right away?
That's a good question. So like in introductory basketball, we don't have anybody shoot on a 10-foot hoop. And that includes our 6th graders. They shoot on 9.5-foot hoops because we want the game to be fun for them. We want the game to be we want the game to be about fun, friends, and physical activity. So for us, it's not necessarily an age. What I would encourage anybody who's struggling with that question, I would encourage them to refer back to the youth guidelines with USA Basketball and the Junior NBA. I know there's a lot of work that was put into providing recommendations for when baskets should be at what height, and I would be 100% behind what those guidelines say for when 10-foot baskets should be used, and I think I think we use 10-foot baskets way too early, and I think but I think there's another issue with that. It's not just 10-foot baskets; it's the size of the ball. I can't tell you how many arguments I've had to be in over the last 2 years of like 3rd graders wanting to play with a 29.5 ball, and it's like, dude, why are we even having this conversation? Like it's not. I don't see any benefit or value in this for kids. But we have there's fights over. There's people playing in specific tournaments because they use a different size of ball over the other, and I'm sure there's somebody out there that's gonna have a really great argument for the 29.5 ball with your 2nd grade team, but I don't. I don't have a great argument for that.
Their hands are so small. How could they even use that?
Yeah, it just when you really think about, I mean, this is what I always go back to people, and I say, I'll get parents that I'll have conversations with. I'm like, you should have if your kid's working on their shot and you really want them to be able to play and they're in second grade, then their basket should be at 8 feet or 8.5 feet or whatever it might be. And they're like, well, but no, they got to be able to shoot on a 10-foot basket. And then you tell them, you're like, look, professional players are playing on a 10-foot basket. Your child is in second grade. Why would you have them using the same size ball and the same size basket as LeBron is using? That, it just doesn't. The fact that somebody tries to come up with a rational argument against using a smaller ball or using a basket that's lower, it's amazing to me. And then and one of the things that is a challenge too, just speaking from my own perspective, like running camps, a lot of times I don't necessarily have my own facility to use, so I go into a facility and I don't have the capability of having a lower basket. So then it forces you as a coach to be, and a camp director, it forces you to be creative with those kids who can't get the ball up to the basket, because obviously any kid, no matter what do we all love to do what do we all love to do in basketball? Everybody likes to fire the ball up at the rim, regardless of whether we have any chance of making it. But then you just have to be creative in the way that you allow the kids to work on their skills. So then you're doing more dribbling, you're doing more tagging games, you're doing things like that allow those kids who don't have the capability of getting the ball up to the basket to still experience the game in a positive way. And so it's amazing some of the logic that you hear from people that argues against a lot of the guidelines that you see that USA Basketball has put out.
And I will tell you this, because I'm sure you'll have some guys that listen to this, and the last thing that I ever want to come off on is like that their opinion is not logical. Like, I get it, like I get why you would say it, but what I would say is we don't make that argument in any other sport. Like, you've never gone to a little league game and said, hey man, I'm pulling my kid out of this league because he doesn't play on a 380-foot field. Like that, like you're never going to make that argument, and you don't make it in any of the other sports. The reason we make it in basketball is because we just haven't seen it done differently. We haven't seen it done in a way that where a kid has those opportunities. I will tell you this as a program director now. When I go to look for facilities for our program to play at, I look for two things. I don't look for, like, is it a really nice hardwood floor? I look for, are the baskets adjustable, and do they have short courts? And if they do those two things, that is like a prime facility for us. And we absolutely will get into conversations with the people that are in those facilities, because that is incredibly valuable in our basketball world. So if you're building a facility, if you're thinking about building a facility, spend a little bit extra to make adjustable baskets and to provide a few extra lines for short courts. And if you do it in Phoenix, feel free to email me, please.
Great. That's a great point. I know one of the things, like whenever we're running camp, like with our young kids, we don't play any full court games. We're playing all small sided half court games, again, because to your point that you made earlier, when you watch those younger kids play a full court game and they're spending 90% of their time running between the two free throw lines and they're spending very, very little time actually playing basketball and developing their skills and doing the fun parts of the game, which is dribbling and having the ball and getting an opportunity to shoot. And basically they could go out and jog the neighborhood and probably get just as much benefit out of it. So I think that's, the short-sided games, the shorter courts, all are things that intuitively make sense to me, and obviously to you as well. And the fact that a lot of people don't see that or need to be educated on what the benefits to that are, I think the success of what you're doing there in Arizona obviously points to the fact that if you can get your product in front of people, that you're providing a great experience for kids as your program has grown.
Yeah, and I think one of the points that I want to make is It's not always good. Youth programs are not always quantified by their size. Like, success is not always quantified by size. You can build a good little business where you can make a decent living and you can serve your community really, really well, and it doesn't have to be huge. Like, it doesn't have to be huge. You just got to be smart. You have to be smart about your overhead. You have to be smart about, I think this is a big thing in basketball, is like, we tend to hire people like it's going out of style. And we tend to overpay them for their services. And I think being smart about, as an operator, like, hey, you're the owner of the organization. The only reason you should be hiring somebody else is if you genuinely can't do it. And if you can't do it, then that's reasonable to look at. But it's not reasonable to just pay somebody to stand on the side and cross their arms. That's not a good business idea. And I think a lot of guys, they would look at our program and say we're successful because we have 3,000 kids that are playing. That doesn't make us successful. What makes us successful is that hopefully we are faithful to providing environments that give kids the opportunity to experience the game in a positive way. That's success. That's success, not the size, the faithfulness to serving people well. And you can do that in a small town. You can do that in a city. You can do that in a rural community. You can do that anywhere. You can do that through camps. You can do that through leagues. You can do that through individual skill training. Success is not defined. In America, we define success by bigness. And I think that's so wrong. I think success should be defined by faithfulness and our willingness to get up every single day and serve people well. That's success. Success is not having a certain number of people in your program.
Talk a little bit about how, with CCV STARS, how you have Multisports, because I think this is something that is just starting to become, I don't know, popular is the wrong word, but just starting to come on the consciousness of people. Yeah, where people are starting to think about that as a model. You know, I know here where we are in Cleveland, I can't think of anybody that's doing that. I'm pretty much assured that, you know, you have your soccer group, you have your basketball group, you have your baseball group. You don't have any of these things kind of under one umbrella. So talk a little bit about how that came to be and what you think the advantage. I mean, we already talked a little bit about what the advantages are, but talk a little bit about why you feel like that's such a part of what success you've been able to have.
Yeah, so a couple of things. It came about because of one guy. Well, I mean, it came about for a lot of different reasons, but the guy that our soccer guy that was head of our soccer stuff is a guy named Harry Demos, and he's one of the best leaders I've ever been around, and he cares about our community, loves our community, and wants to serve our community. And they started to realize as soccer got bigger and bigger, and we have about 8,000 kids that play soccer every year. So soccer is enormous. And he just always had a heart for, hey, if there's kids in our community that we're not serving, like let's provide ways to serve them. And we're a youth organization that comes out of a church called Christ Church of the Valley, and I think that makes a huge difference for us because we genuinely we want to be self-sustainable, and we want to make a profit, but that's not our ultimate and driving motivator, and I think that's why we're so profitable. It's because we are incredibly committed to providing what we call a more than a game experience for the kids that come into our program. We believe that every time that in a lot of ways, we believe that the youth sports is the cultural hub of our society today. This is where people congregate. This is where people come together. And 100 years ago, it used to be at the town square, and people would come together and talk there. Now it's at the fields. Like, parents get to know, like, a lot of times the friends that they make are from the sports that they play, and we saw so many youth sports experiences just be volatile and just not great for the kids in our community, not great for our community. And so I think he had an incredible vision of being able to provide something in our community that could serve our community well. And then from there he went and I think this is a big part of it, is he didn't try to do all the sports himself. He went and got incredibly well-versed people in these other sports. So we've had former NFL guys who have run our football program, and that's an incredible program. And I think we do a pretty good job in basketball. And he's empowered us and allowed us to run with it and to lead it out. And I think it's in my opinion, I think it's a model that should be taken seriously in a lot of different areas. But what it requires club operators to collaborate. It requires, like if you were to look in Cleveland, it requires the guy that's doing the best job with a basketball program going to a guy that's doing an incredible job with a soccer program and saying, hey, could we work together here? Is there some synergy between what you do and what we do? Not from a sports perspective, but just an overall philosophy perspective. And wouldn't it be cool if a kid could play soccer in the summer in Cleveland or whenever you play it, but he could play basketball in the winter, and then they could play both of those sports and they could get better at those sports. And what we've seen is teams actually stay together. So like in Phoenix, where it's like 109,000 degrees in the summer, basketball is enormous in Phoenix in the summer. And so our biggest season is in the summer. And so what we have is we have all the kids that don't play football and they don't play soccer in the summer. They all get to play basketball in the summer. But then when we get to the fall, then those kids will go, some of them will go play soccer and go play football. But what we have seen is we have teams that will play basketball together in the summer, then they'll go play soccer together in the fall, then they'll play football together in the spring. And those families and the relationships that happen amongst those families is incredible. And I don't know why more people don't build youth programs, build them off of that. And I will tell you this, like, just so all of you that have in your mind like this hokey little church league that you all probably have seen or experienced at some point, like, we are not uncommitted to doing sports really, really well. Some of our club soccer teams are some of the best soccer teams in America. Some of our football kids, they go and play at some of the best high schools in the state of Arizona, or in the Phoenix area. And the way we're building basketball, we have no desire but to do the sport really, really well. But I think you can do that in a way that is that's about more than a game.
So how did you leave your high school teaching career and coaching to come over to do what you're doing now? Describe that process of how you made the transition and what made you want to make that transition.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think every transition that I've had in my life has been one that I just kind of at that point I knew this was the right thing to do, and it's the right thing for the time being. I've never felt like any decisions that I've ever made are final decisions, that they're decisions like, hey, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. They're decisions of like, hey, this is where I think I need to be right now, and we'll see what happens moving forward. But what I would say is a couple things. I think my capacity to lead well at the high school when I was running our youth program. I'm the executive director of our coaching association in Arizona. That has been an incredible experience for me, and I help out with USA Basketball and do that as well. And so my travel was starting to get more. I was starting to have to neglect things that were important to me within my high school program, and so I just felt like, man, this is the time. It's been the ability to do it financially is there, and I think I can. I think for the time being, I'm going to serve people in a different way, and so I'm thankful. I do miss having a team. I miss being. There's something really special about having 12 kids or having a program and kind of seeing that process through. I really admire tremendously guys that do that, and I'm not saying that I'll never do that again, but I'm really thankful for where I'm at right now, and hopefully trying to be faithful to the things that are in my path currently, and hopefully those are being used in a way that's making an impact in people's lives.
So you talked about just two other things that you do that you have on your resume that I'm just curious to pick your brain about how you got involved in them. So talk a little bit about how you first got connected with USA Basketball, and then a little bit about what some of the things that you've done through your involvement with USA Basketball have been.
So I'll say this, like, I am the greatest example of a guy that has no business being a part of USA Basketball. I just got lucky, man. I was just in the right place at the right time. USA Basketball, I started volunteering there a little over 8 years ago, and in a lot of ways, man, it was a much different organization at that time. Like, it was much smaller. There was much more need. There was not as much demand. And I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico, man. Like, who gets involved with USA Basketball from Albuquerque, New Mexico? And most, are you from Albuquerque, or do you have a connection?
No, I was just going to make a Breaking Bad reference, so I decided to stop myself. I apologize.
I'm going to tell you, this interview might end very, very quickly if we start making Breaking Bad references. No, I love Albuquerque, great place, and I still have a lot of family that lives there. But so I'm from there. I went to a clinic in Denver, Colorado, and Don Showalter spoke at the clinic, and he gave out his email address, and so did 9 other guys at the clinic. And I was young, and I went back home, and I said, you know what, I'm just going to email these guys. I'm going to email every one of them. And I think back in those days, it was kind of like that. I think there's like a overt self-promotion, where like you go on Twitter and you like genuinely, like, no holds barred, like, hey dude, I'm just totally promoting myself right now. And then there's like this covert self-promotion where you like, man, I'm going to email everybody, but I'm going to tell them like, hey man, I'm just trying to seek out knowledge, but you're not really trying to seek out knowledge. You're just trying to make a connection. And I think there was probably a little bit of covert self-promotion in those emails, and 8 of the 9 guys never returned my email, which is probably great. But Coach Showalter did, and if you know Coach Showalter, he is one of the most amazing human beings on the planet. And so when he emailed me back, I said, Coach, I'd love to come up and be able to watch a practice or whatever, because he said, if you email me, you can do that. And he said, connect with BJ Johnson. So I connected with him, and then I got invited. Well, I didn't get invited. They were like, hey, dude, you can come up and you can watch a practice. So I came up, and I was sitting there, had my notebook out, and like, man, this is the coolest thing ever. I'm in the Olympic Training Center, and BJ came over and he was like, hey man, would you mind sweeping the floor? Like, cool, dude. Yeah, like, I'm not above that. I'll totally sweep the floor. So I sweep the floor, and it's like, hey, the guys, when they come in, like, they get thirsty and they need Gatorade. Like, would you mind filling up some Gatorade? Like, no, I'll do whatever you want, man. So fill up some Gatorade. And then it was, for some reason, that first night I was there, one of the referees didn't show up. It's like, hey dude, would you mind refereeing one of the games? Like, yeah, I guess so. Sure, I'd go ahead and do that. And then from there, it was just one of those deals of like, just trying to be faithful with the little opportunities that you get, and trying to cultivate those things, and then them being gracious enough. To be honest with you, man, like, a lot of this has to do with USA Basketball's willingness to be gracious enough to allow me to be involved. and to allow me to volunteer. I don't want to make this sound in any stretch of the imagination that I was running any of the practices. Dude, I was doing laundry. I was hanging out in the dorms. I was filling up water jugs. And then Coach Showalter, as he got to know me a little bit more, he'd tell me hey man, you can step in during post perimeter, or hey, we need an extra team to get, an extra team to be coached during the scrimmages. You can do that. But I was on the absolute bottom rung of the totem pole, and deservedly, because there are some amazing guys that are a part of that organization. And then 4 or 5 years ago, they started a youth division, and I was fortunate enough to start getting involved with that, and they've given me some incredible opportunities through that. I've gotten a chance to speak at some of the coaching academies, and I had a chance to work with one of my favorite people on the entire planet, Jamie Carey, who's an assistant at the University of Texas, and we did some work on the youth development guidebook, which is really what gave me a passion and love for that system and that model, and why I'm so passionate about being something that we need to adopt nationally. And then Coach Showalter has given me opportunity to be a lead clinician and do some different things. And through that, I've developed a relationship with the people at the MBA and the junior MBA, and got to work on the guidelines with them. And so it's provided me with opportunities that I absolutely never thought that I would have. But I'm thankful that I've gotten, and we'll kind of see where it goes from here.
Yes, I'm going to pull two things out of what you said for anybody who's listening. And the two things that I heard you say that came through as the themes of that story is, one, hard work. So one, you showed up, and when they asked you to sweep the floor, you didn't look at them cross-eyed and go back and sit in the bleachers and think that was beneath you. So you were willing to work hard. And I think when any of us are willing to work hard at whatever we do, if we put our best into the things that we're doing, good things are going to happen. It doesn't always guarantee you success, but if you're not working hard, success is definitely going to be out of your reach. So that's number one. And then I think the second thing that I hear is doing that hard work put you in a position where you could develop relationships with people who had the opportunity to help you along. But because you built a genuine relationship with them, they were more than happy to pull you up beside them and give you opportunities. And now you're having the opportunity to go back and do that for the kids you're working with and for coaches, and just, again, giving back by coming on the podcast with us. Those are all just things that I think that anyone, whether you're a young coach, whether you've been in the business for 25 years, whether you're a parent, whether you're a player, anybody can learn from those two messages that you just gave us, which is hard work doesn't guarantee success, but it certainly gives you a better opportunity. And number two, relationships are so important in whatever you do in life. And I think that those are two things that I pull out of what you said that can really have meaning for people.
Yeah, and I think two things to piggyback off of that. One is how important relational equity is. If you haven't built up relational equity with somebody, you have no ask at all. So I think the ability to develop relational equity, and that starts by serving other people. And I think that's a challenge for people is we a lot of times get into relationships to take instead of give, and equity is never built by taking. Equity is always built by giving, and so I think being able to cultivate some relational equity with people is important. And then I think the second thing is success always is determined by your pain tolerance. It's always determined by your pain tolerance. Success requires suffering, and a lot of times the most successful people are the people that are willing to suffer the most. And if you have no desire to suffer, you have no chance of being successful. And I think it's painful. I mean, success is painful. It's hard. It's not easy. It's and success is defined differently in different situations. And so I think if you want to always be liked, if you want to always feel good, if you want to always, if you feel like you're entitled to things, if you feel like if the words come out of your mouth, that's not my job, if you're not willing to pick up trash, if you're not committed to excellence, if you don't care about relationships, you got no chance of being successful. I mean, you just don't, and in my opinion, at least with the way that I define success. And so I think for me, like I don't ever want to walk by a piece of trash that I don't pick up. I don't ever want to value a program more than I value a person. I don't ever want to be somebody that isn't committed to excellence. And when I say I'm committed to excellence, I'm willing to sacrifice. If I got to get something done, I'm going to sacrifice anything. I'll sacrifice sleep. I'll sacrifice time. I'll sacrifice money. I will sacrifice more than you will. And I think that's a big part of being able to be successful.
So talk about how you are passing along some of the lessons that you've learned as the director of the Arizona Basketball Coaches Association. I know that when you and I talked, you said that it went from an organization that had 0 members to what it is today. And I know you have a big clinic. By the time that this goes live, the clinic will have already happened, and I'm sure it'll be a huge success. But talk a little bit about how you got started with that, what your vision was when you first started, where you are today, and then where you see it going and what you hope to accomplish. Because I've looked at it since you and I talked a little bit. I went on and looked at your Twitter account and looked at the website, and just some of the things that were leaping off the page at me are things that I think the model seems like it would be a model that every state should try to copy, because I think you have so many good things going there that anybody could benefit from. So talk a little bit about your experience there.
Yeah, so I didn't ever have a desire to be an executive director of a coaches association. That was not something that jumped off the page for me, or it was not a pursuit that I really wanted to look at. The reason it happened is because there was some legislation that was passed in the state of Arizona that I didn't think was in the best interest of basketball programs. And I called one of my buddies and said, "Hey, man, where's the Coaches Association when we need them?" And he said, "Well, there is no Coaches Association." And so that's just kind of my personality, is when there's not something that I think there needs to be, I'm going to raise my hand and I'm going to try to do it. And if somebody else can't do it. And there's plenty of people in the state of Arizona that can do it, but it just so happened that I was in the right place at the right time, and I raised my hand. And so when we got together, the first thing we asked each other is, what do we want this to be about? And the 2 guys that were with me at the time were Mark Wood, who's the head coach at Liberty High School, who's one of the most unbelievable human beings you'll ever meet, and a guy named Todd Fazio, who is likewise an incredible man and an incredible coach. When we got together, we asked ourselves, like, what do we want to do here? Because we're all coaches, we're all high school coaches. How do we want to go about this? And we came up with 3 things. We exist to do 3 things. We exist to develop coaches, we exist to serve coaches, and we exist to connect coaches. And so everything that we do kind of goes through that. Now, we were very, very fortunate because we took over a dissolved coaches association that did not exist, basically did not exist for whatever reason. And so we were starting from scratch. We had no board of directors. We had no policies in place. We could start from absolute scratch. And so from being able to start from there, we started to ask ourselves, like, what do we want to give our time and energy to? And so we said we're not going to be the same as other coaches associations. One, we're going to be a coaches association for everyone. So anybody that picks up a basketball in the state of Arizona and works with a kid, we want you in our association, and we want to serve you. We want to develop you. We want to connect you. So that means whether you coach at a high school, whether you coach a club, whether you coach a youth program, whether you coach a kid in the driveway and you just want to get better at that. If you're willing to pick up a ball, we want to work with you, and we want to be around you. Second thing is we felt like we didn't have to do the same programming that typical coaches associations did. So we don't do all-star games. We don't do coaches Hall of Fames. We don't do all-state selections. We don't do any of those. And I'm not going to say necessarily our justification of why, because I know a lot of states do it, and I have a lot of really good friends now that run those states, and I want to be respectful of what they do, but we don't do those things in Arizona. What we did is we wanted to start one major program a year. And so the first thing we did was, hey, let's put a clinic together. It's the easiest way to get everybody together so that we can develop coaches as a whole. We did that last year. We had Coach Showalter, we had Tom Crean, it was kind of like, hey man, we're going to kind of see if this thing's going. And like 300 coaches showed up. And it was like, wow. But the thing that we did was, we said from the beginning that the number one thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the barrier of cost for every coach. Because as soon as we charge 50 cents for a coach to be a part, there's a large part of the coaching population that just won't sign up. Whether that's a volunteer dad who doesn't want to invest in that, or that's a club coach or a high school coach or whatever. And we felt like coaches were always being the ones asked for money, and they are the ones with no money. And so our commitment from the beginning was, we're going to remove that barrier. So in the state of Arizona, we do not have a due to be a part of the coaching association. We do not charge you to come to our clinic. So it is absolutely free. Any coach that wants to come tomorrow night, and I know this is going to air after that, but you can come to the Arizona Basketball Coaches Association clinic for free. Now, with that said, we do a big raffle, and we have some ways of making things financially sustainable on our end through corporations in our community and stuff like that. But we wanted to remove the barrier of cost. The second thing that we did, that we piloted last spring along with Positive Coaching Alliance, and now we have it off and running, is we started what's called a Youth Development Academy. And we have 3 regions in Phoenix right now that have youth teams that are playing. And basically these are like feeder clubs that are going into high schools, and they play against each other. We play by USA basketball guidelines. We only allow man-to-man to be played through 8th grade. We have specific rules that are played by, but we also have things that are provided to like parents have to act a certain way, officials have to act a certain way. The catch is, we charge significantly less for our league than anybody would charge, because we find people to help donate, and then we have a tournament at the end of the season that is completely free for everybody that plays in the Youth Development Academy. But if you play in the Youth Development Academy and you do not abide by our rules, then you don't get to play anymore. And so what we really created this thing for was not to do another league. It was not to provide another situation. It was to look at people that we feel like are doing things in a way that's developmentally appropriate for kids, and trying to push as much money back into their clubs as we possibly can, so that they can become sustainable businesses. Because what we want is, we want to be business. We want the association to be a business creator, that these clubs would be able to become sustainable, so that 15 years down the line, we have the same guy running the same club in the same community and doing just a knockdown job of it. And we feel like that's what helps communities grow. And so we're using the Youth Development Academy as a means to do that. So one of the things that we will do with our club operators is, if you want to be in the Youth Development Academy, there's actually going to be a business mentoring program that you have to go through. And so if you're a club director, we have business people in the community that are going to mentor these guys in how to set up their club, how to do it effectively. If you want to be a 501c3, what do you have to do? How do you have to look? If you want to be an LLC, how do you set that up, and what's appropriate? Is it better for you to 1099 an employee, or is it better for you to W-2 an employee? How do you pay your taxes? When should you pay your taxes? How do you build a business plan? How do you do a budget? Those types of things that help these things turn from hustles to actual organizations. And so that's the second thing that we started. And then this next year, we're starting a program called Everyone Plays, which is a campaign to subsidize costs in the inner city, so that kids that don't have the opportunity to pay for club basketball or for developmentally appropriate basketball can be provided with that opportunity. And we feel like there's a major issue in youth sports of basketball leaving the inner city, or only being provided to the kids that have elite talent. And then the other kids don't ever get to play because they can't afford the fee, or they can't get transportation to the suburbs to play where the leagues are located. And so we have this huge initiative called Everyone Plays, where we're going to try to go into inner cities through existing organizations and provide sustainable means for those kids in those communities to be able to get the same type of instruction, the same type of experience that a kid in the suburbs with money would get.
Yeah, those are three just tremendous initiatives. I know we talked to Coach Phil Schmuck, who by the time we air this episode, his episode will have come on, but he talked about the same thing in terms of the suburbanization of basketball, that, it used to be in the, 60s, 70s, 80s, basketball was considered to be a city game and everybody learned the game on the playground. And now, those playground games don't exist anymore, at least not to the same degree they did back at that time. And now, in order to play on the, on the club circuit, you do have to have a certain amount of income and a certain amount of money that you can put towards that. And you have to have transportation. And a lot of times that is a detriment to the kids who are, who are in the inner city, who want to play, but just don't have the means to be able to get it done. So I think that's a tremendous thing that you're doing there. And again, I go ahead,
Mike. Can I say something?
Sure, absolutely.
One of the things is, it doesn't have to be that way. I think there are a lot of organizations, there's a lot of organizations that are willing to invest money into inner city sports. But a lot of times with basketball, especially, a lot of us aren't aware of the money that is out there to be able to subsidize that cost, or we don't have our organization structured appropriately to actually be able to even apply for those things. And so being able to apply for grants, or being able to apply for opportunities like that, where we could subsidize the cost because of our lack of organization, and our lack of being able to structure our things appropriately. A lot of times we don't even get to apply for those things. And so I think one of the major issues as basketball shifts from being a completely scholastic sport to being a hybrid, I think one of the things that we have to take into account, and I think they've done this in soccer, I know they've done it in hockey. I mean, all of these other governing bodies, or a lot of them, have done a tremendous job of teaching people how to run organizations. And we have to see the value in the fact that running a club is not just knowing how to teach kids how to dribble, pass, and shoot. You have to be able to structure this thing and organize it. And if you don't know, that's okay. It's not that I mean, if you don't know, you don't know. And we've got to educate people. We've got to educate coaches on how to do these things properly, so that they can apply for those types of things. And because I think if they can apply for them, many of them will get them, and they'll be able to do some amazing work with that capital that organizations like in our town, like the Fiesta Bowl. Fiesta Bowl donated $2.5 million last year to organizations in our community that help kids, and specifically help kids with education or sports. $2.5 million. And I don't know. I mean, outside of the major organizations, there's not a lot of clubs that received any of that, because many of us we weren't organized properly.
So as you look at trying to help the basketball businesses in your area, is that coming from some of the retired or current business people that you talked about? Is there a curriculum that you're putting together, or is it more of a situation where you or somebody else, a retired business person, is looking at that individual's business and helping them with their specific case? Like, how do you have that organized, or how do you foresee that working?
Yeah, so we'll provide it both ways. I think there'll be some things that are common to everybody, but I think there's some things that are contextualized as well. And so I think it has to have both pieces to the pie. I think it has to have this basic fundamentals of doing it, and then I think it has to have some mentorship. And so we've got to be able to provide some capacity in both directions, and then also too, you've got to provide basic fundamentals. You've got to provide mentoring, but then you also have to provide an environment where these people can be successful. I think a lot of people look at most industries in our world. They have an environment. They have a structure to their environment. There's regulations on the technology industries. There's regulations on almost every type of industry. There's some form of governance over that. In basketball, it's the Wild Wild West.
Yeah, there's not.
There's just not. And so I think that's one of the things that I think USA Basketball will provide as we move forward. I think it's things that the coaches associations in each state can help with, is providing some form of governance, and us realizing that governance can be an incredibly good thing in communities if it exists to create communities where the people can flourish, not where the government can flourish. And I think that's what we're trying as hard as we can to do with the Coaches Association here, is stay as small as we can, stay as flexible as we can, and try as hard as we can to hold ourselves accountable to the fact that we exist for our coaches. Our coaches don't exist for us. And if we can keep that mentality and we can keep serving them and we can keep doing it for the right reasons, I think we got a chance to be successful. Because I'll tell you this, like you asked at the beginning, like what do we want to impart on our coaches? Gosh, there's a lot of things that we'd love to walk with our coaches on, but we're not here to impart in it. Like I'm learning from our coaches here way more than I'm teaching them. Like I just want to, like there's guys in our community like Gary Ernst at Mesa Mountain View here. Like I just want to ask him questions. I don't need to tell Gary. Gary's been around. I mean, he's done this for it seems like hundreds of years, and he's done it at an incredibly high level. Like I'm just curious about what makes him tick, and that is what is so special about being a part of the association, is it allows us to interact with some of the most amazing people on the planet. And I will tell you, some of the best coaches in our country are people that nobody will ever hear their name outside of that community. And because usually the best guys are the guys that aren't beating their chest. They are the guys that are like for instance, you had Eric Flannery on. I know Eric and from my time at USA Basketball, and Eric's a great example of that. Like Eric is the most down-to-earth human being that I have ever been around, and one of the best coaches I've ever been around. I admire him so much, and the work that he does with his kids, and I've seen him coach those kids. And like Eric Flannery doesn't need a coaches association, but a coaches association could certainly learn from an Eric Flannery. The thing about an Eric Flannery in a coaches association is that he now has the opportunity to impact other people, because the association can help connect those things. And I don't speak specifically for Eric, but I say that in our state as well. It's just been amazing to see these guys with a little bit of connection be able to do things and impact the lives of other coaches and other programs in the way that they have. They're my heroes, I'll tell you that. The coaches here in Arizona, they're the people I look up to. I mean, we can all have these Coach K and Calipari and all those guys. Not for me. I look at our coaches here in Arizona in the conditions that they have to coach under sometimes. Those are my heroes.
Yeah, I think that we found through just the short time that we've been doing the podcast, what you just said is one of the things that we've found to be just tremendously important to what we're doing, and that is we've gotten a chance to talk to some coaches that we've known for a while. We've gotten to talk to coaches that a week before we talked to them, we had never knew they existed. And yet everybody that we've talked to has just shared through their story and through the things that they've done and the way they've coached their teams and the way they've lived their lives. They've been able to share things that I think can enrich anyone who's part of our basketball community, can listen to the podcast and draw out things from any one of the shows or interviews that we've been able to do. And what you've shared tonight, you've just had such a wide breadth of experiences within the game that I think you've just shared a tremendous amount of knowledge that anybody who listens to this episode is going to be able to pull out some things that they can use to make themselves a better coach or a better parent, or even taking it down to, if there's any players that are listening to it, they can take some of the lessons that you've shared and make themselves better. So I want to wrap it up because I want to be a little bit respectful of your time, as we're coming up on almost 2 hours. But is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you want to hit on? And if there is, go ahead and share that. And then if not, if you would share the way that people can get in touch with you if they want to reach out and have a question, or maybe if any Arizona coaches are out there, they want to get involved in some of the things that you're doing, let us know how people can get in touch with you.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say is the first thing I said. One is I appreciate you guys. I appreciate what you're doing. Appreciate what you're doing to try to help the game. And more importantly, I hear people say that a lot, like, we want to grow the game, and that's fine. I think that's all good, but I appreciate what you're doing for people and how you're impacting the lives of people. So I appreciate that. I think if there's anything that I could say for somebody that has endured the marathon and has come to the end, the one thing I would say is just keep waking up, man. Just keep waking up. Just keep getting up every day and keep being consistent and keep trying to get just a little bit better, and try to smile while you do it. And I think if we can do that, there's something super mature about just sticking around. And I can guarantee you there's probably many people who listen to this podcast. There's many people in our country that are coaching that, especially young in their age, where it's painful and it's hard, and you just took a tough job and you're battling through it, or you took a really good job and you aren't meeting the expectations, and it's tough right now. Stick with it, man. Stick with it, man. Coaches are so impactful in the lives of kids, and they're so important to our society. We don't need to lose more good ones. We need to keep them. And so I just encourage you with that. As far as getting connected with me, I don't do social media at all. God bless the people that do, and I have a real admiration for them. But that's just not me. And so if you want to email me, you're more than welcome to. It's just coachking32@gmail.com. I'd love to connect with you. And if you want to get connected to the Arizona Basketball Coaches Association, I absolutely love to connect you with that. We do have a Twitter handle. It's at AZBBall Coaches. Yeah, at AZBBall Coaches. And then if you ever want to get any information on us, you can always visit our website at www.azbasketballcoaches.com. Super excited for the future of that. And if you're an Arizona coach, and just keep doing what you're doing, man. I love you and appreciate you.
Matt, thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule, especially I know with your big clinic coming up tomorrow, the fact that you were willing to come on and spend 2 hours with us and our audience. We can't thank you enough. We're very grateful for everything that you're doing for the game. Just like I can feel your love for the game of basketball coming through my headphones here tonight during the podcast. Hopefully the same thing comes through from our end. We love the game. We want to help the game grow, and I think you've been tremendously valuable in that for us tonight and throughout your career. So thank you to you and to everyone out there listening. Thank you, and we will catch you on our next episode.
Head Start Basketball's Player Development Academy offers Cleveland area players a unique opportunity to improve their basketball skills. Regardless of a player's age, skill level, or position, training with Head Start Basketball will elevate your game to the next level. Do you want to improve your ball handling, become a better shooter, or develop into a more skilled, confident player? Our Academy classes offer training that's designed to do just that. Our training sessions are innovative and will have you learning skills that are transferable to actual games. We have 4 different class skill levels for boys and girls, ages 4 and up. All Player Development Academy classes will be held at the Strongsville Recreation Center. For more information or to get registered, please visit www.headstartbasketball.com. HeadStartBasketball.com.
Thanks for listening to the Hoop Heads podcast, brought to you by Head Start Basketball.